Hi, I'm John Hornick. Welcome to Lesson 15 of Chef's Apprentice, Learning to Cook Like a Pro, one small plate at a time. This lesson is Armagnac steamed clams with apples and foie gras. Clams and foie gras are introduced in this preparation, which is simple but delicious. This description calls for clams that you rinse clean before the lesson. Be careful to wash away any sand, and remember, if any of the clams are open when you rinse them, they are dead and they must be thrown away. Foie gras is a wonderful, decadent, pro ingredient that can be hard to master. This preparation starts you off easy, but don't be surprised if the foie gras disappears into the broth. It will add richness and flavor, even if you can't see it. In this lesson, you will also learn steaming, which is a powerful and quick way to cook foods. Techniques today are working with clams, dicing, peeling, and coring apples, working with foie gras, steaming, keeping warm, straining, and whisking. So let's start cooking. Okay, welcome to Lesson 15, which is Armagnac steamed clams with apples and foie gras. So first we're going to talk about our mise en place, the ingredients. And of course we're going to need some clams. Here I have some cherrystone clams. The description calls for 6 clams per person as a small plate. And that's 6 clams after you have cleaned them and make sure they're all still alive. I have not washed these yet. I do not know yet whether these are all alive. But I have about half as many as the description calls for, because I'm not making a full 8 small plates in this video. Secondly, we will need to have some scallions. I think probably 2 is enough, but we're going to slice 3. It's always better to have more. We don't have to use it all. We can use what's left over for some other preparation. Also need to have 1 Granny Smith apple. We're using Granny Smiths because after they have been peeled and diced, they don't brown as fast as some other apples. Now we're also going to toss that apple in some lemon juice. We have half a lemon here. To prevent browning. But if you're preparing the apple well beforehand, or if using some other kind of apple, you need to have the lemon, which if you toss the apple in the lemon juice, it will prevent it from browning. Let's see, we're also going to need foie gras. Now here I have it vacuum packed, which I had in the freezer. The description calls for 4 ounces. We're using about half as many clams, so I'm going to use about 2 ounces of foie gras today. And I'm going to keep that cold. So right after we go off camera, that's going to go back in the fridge till we need it. We'll also need some Armagnac. Armagnac is like cognac. It's considered to be one of the noble spirits. I don't know why they call it noble, but foie gras and cognac are often associated with each other. Also, sauterne is often associated with foie gras. A couple more words about the foie gras. This is duck liver foie gras, not goose. Goose is hard to find. Most of what you find in the United States is duck liver. The source for this is D'Artagnan.com. D'Artagnan, like one of the 3 Musketeers. Actually, I think he was the 4th Musketeer. And so you can get that from D'Artagnan over the internet. And now most of the foie gras that you will find in the United States, or even in France for that matter, is duck foie gras. It has less fat, makes it easier to work with, easier to sear without it all melting away. If you get foie gras too hot, too fast, it can just melt away in the pan. Goose liver is considered to be more refined and it has more fat, but it's also harder to find. There's just not that much of it around. And okay, so we're also going to need some unsalted butter, or as my spell correct changes it to insalted butter. And we'll need a peppermill with some either red or pink peppercorns. And we'll need some crusty bread. Now this is a baguette. It's about 2 days old. This is a great use for some baguette that's kind of left over. You don't need to buy a fresh one for this because the bread is going to be used to soak in the broth, so it will soften up when it does that. So this is a great use of bread that's a day or 2 old. Okay, so I think we've gone through all of the mise en place. So we're going to break now, and we're going to come back and talk about the equipment that we need for this lesson. Okay, so let's talk about the equipment that we need for lesson 15. We're going to need a cutting board, as always, chef's knife. We will also need to have a peeler to peel the Granny Smith apple. And optionally, you may want to have a corer. Now, I'm going to show you how you can core the apple without using a corer. And maybe we'll try to do it both ways. Both of these, the peeler and the corer, are OXO products. I think OXO makes great products. They're ergonomic, they hold up well, they work well. We'll also need to have a juicer so that we can squeeze the lemon juice onto the apple after we've diced the apple. We'll also need to have a bowl to hold the apple once we have diced it and tossing it in the lemon juice. And we're going to need a steamer pot. And here's a steamer pot. This steamer pot, as like all steamer pots, has a steamer basket. So you put the water in here, you put the basket inside, you put the clams in the basket, and a lid on the top. Okay, so you'll need a steamer pot. For the amount of clams that we're doing, that's just about the right size. And we'll need to have a bread knife for purposes of slicing the crusty bread. And we'll need to have a bowl to strain the broth into using strainers. So we'll be pouring the broth into this bowl through the strainer. And so you need a bowl and a strainer. And then we will need to have a whisk for purposes of whisking the butter into the broth. And we will need a ladle to ladle the broth out for purposes of plating. So that's all the equipment that we need for lesson 15. I'll break now and I'll come back and we'll start cooking. Okay, one last thing I wanted to mention about equipment. I had a slicing knife sitting right there on the cutting board, and I forgot to mention it. We will need a slicing knife for cutting and dicing the foie gras. All right, so let's get started with our prep list. First thing we're going to do is slice the scallions. Now, I don't know if we've done this before. We're almost finished with the easy part of this course, so we will not be doing some of the same types of slicing and chopping that we've been doing before, because you've already learned how to do this. But we're going to do the scallions probably one last time. First, you want to trim off the root end, a nice even cut. You can also make after you've trimmed off the root, you can also cut them on the bias, which is more attractive. And that's what we're going to do now. To do 3 at the same time, you can line them up kind of at an angle, with 45-degree angle with your knife, and then start slicing on an angle. You want pieces that are about a 1/16 of an inch thick. And we're going to keep slicing. We're going to take all of the white part of the scallion, and we're going to take probably about half of the green part of the scallion. I like the part that is still pretty solid. When you get down to the hollow part of the scallion, I might use those in some preparations, but I'm not going to use them today. All right, so we have here the scallions. I think the description called for either 5 or 6 scallions. We're using 3. Looks like a good amount, actually, for that amount of clams. Again, use your judgment. Decide how much you want. It's also somewhat, these scallions are providing flavor. They're also providing a green color, some color counterpoint. So think about, how many clams do you have? How much scallion do you need to have a nice color balance? All right, so we now have to take the apple. Now, first we're gonna peel it. Probably everybody in the world has already peeled an apple, but we're gonna use this OXO peeler. And it's the same thing when I showed you about peeling potatoes. Some people like to go around and round, and other people like to do it like this, take some of it off. Some people do a combination of the two. Some people like to see if they can do the whole peel in one continuous peel, like I was starting to do there. Of course, I can't do that now because I've switched to this other method. All right, we've gotten all of the peel there. Let's get rid of that so we can work clean. Now, I mentioned before that you can, the corer is optional. Now, we can take this corer, get rid of that little bit of skin on the top, take the corer and start to press it into the apple. Then see, you got to figure out the angle of how the core runs through the apple and kind of line them up so you can see where the core is going in, you can see where you want it to come out, and twist it and push it through the apple, and hopefully it will come out exactly where you want, which it did. So I got the core out that way. And then, but you don't have to use the core. Instead, what you can do is, instead of removing that core, just cut off the sides of the apple and then cut off the remaining short sides, and that will leave you a core that has the seeds in it. Now what we want to do is we want to dice, and we're dicing this apple into a 1/8" dice, which is, you may recall from, if you've taken the knives course that I offer as part of this course. It's an optional lesson. An 1/8" dice is, in French cooking, is called a brunoise. So what I've done now is I've taken this piece of apple and I've sliced it into roughly 1/8" slices. Okay, and now turn it on its side and cut it into 1/8" slices again, using your finger to keep the apple in place as you pull the knife out. Then turn it and cut it into 1/8" pieces again, and you will have an 1/8" brunoise, 1/8" dice. All the pieces are roughly about 1/8 of an inch thick. Do that again on this segment of the apple. Okay. Same with this one. It doesn't take very long to do this. Now, some people will say, why don't you use a food processor? Well, one, I like to do the cutting myself. Two, you get a more precise outcome, exactly what you want, if you cut it yourself rather than doing it in a food processor. I've actually never tried to do this in a food processor. I don't know if, I don't think you would get a brunoise that is, I don't know if you could possibly get a brunoise that is as perfect as you want. Also, why not use a food processor? Now we're doing the short part, so I did it across the top, 1/8" slices, then turn it on its side, 1/8" slices, pull the knife out without pulling the apple pieces apart, and then 1/8" across, and you get the brunoise. The other thing about food processors is that, you know, if you're going to cook like a pro, and of course if you were making large quantities like a pro, you might want to use a food processor sometimes. But when we're cooking kind of artisanal cooking here, you learn a whole lot more and you feel more like a pro if you're doing the cutting yourself rather than using a food processor. All right, now we're going to take the bowl that we have for the apple and put all the pieces in the bowl. More here. Okay, and now we're going to take the lemon, which disappeared, excuse me. Okay, we're back. So as I showed you before, we're going to cut the end off the lemon. Why? So the juice can get out the bottom. Put it into the juicer and squeeze the juice slowly. Why slowly? So that the seeds from the lemon don't pop out the top. You don't want the seeds to go down in there. And I see that one of them did escape. And when you open this, usually more juice will come out, but none did that time. And see that we have one seed down in there. We want to get that out. All right. Then we just want to toss this apple in the lime juice. That will prevent the apple from browning, or at least it will take a whole lot longer for it to brown. Not as important when you're using a Granny Smith apple, because they don't brown as quickly and as fast, or at all actually, But a lot of other kinds of apples, they will brown pretty quickly. They'll start to brown like immediately after you cut them. So using the lemon juice will slow down the browning process. Okay, now let's check our prep list, see where we stand. We have sliced the scallions with the white and some of the green. We peeled and cored and diced the apple into an 1/8 inch brunoise. And we also tossed it in the lemon. And now we want to check our prep our Armagnac. Now prepping in this case simply means you've got it there and it's ready to go. If it's a new bottle, you want to make sure you've taken off the capsule so that when you need it, you can just lift the top off and you're ready to use it. Okay, so that's prepped. Next thing we want to do is slice the bread. So what I want to do is just wipe the board a little bit so we don't have any leftover wetness and lemon juice here. And then we're going to take the crusty bread and we're just going to slice it into pieces that are about 1/2 inch thick with our bread knife. Again, I'll slice it at an angle. Why? Looks better. Also, it gives you a larger slice. If you cut it directly across, your slice is going to be smaller. If you put it at an angle, your slice is going to be bigger. And you just have to slice enough depending on how many you're serving. So if you want to provide, say, 2 pieces per person, and you have, the description calls for enough to make 8 small plates, you'd need 16 slices. Okay, let's see where we stand here. We prepped the Armagnac, we sliced the bread. Now we want to prep the butter. The butter, we want that to be room temperature. And we want to have 4 tablespoons. I want to cut the pieces into roughly tablespoon-sized pieces. That makes them easier to whisk into the broth later on. And the butter, you know, the butter comes with the size right on the side. So we're going to do 1 with the paper still on it. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3. This is even easier if the butter is right out of the fridge. This is getting a little bit closer to room temperature. 4. So I have 4 there. I'm going to just remove the paper, put them into a bowl so I have them later when I need them. If there's going to be any delay, what you should do is put them into the fridge so they stay firm, so they don't go melt back together as a half a stick of butter. Okay, and now let's check our prep list again. Prep the butter. So next thing we need to do is to slice the foie gras. So as I said, you want the foie gras to be cold before you slice it. So it's in the fridge. I'm going to break and come back, and we're going to slice the foie gras. Okay, so we're here at the board to dice the foie gras, and I decided to bring out a bowl of ice and another bowl to put the diced foie gras in, so they don't get soft and start to lose their shape. You don't really need to do this if you're going to dice them right before you put them into the pan, or if you're going to put them right back into the fridge. But since I'm working out here in room temperature, I thought that would be a good thing to do. This is a great way to keep anything cold actually while you're working with it. Just a bowl of ice with another bowl inside. Okay, so now we have a piece of the foie gras out on the board, and you know they're going to be the pieces that you get aren't going to have a regular shape, so you're going to have to look at them and judge how to cut them. So what you want to do is run your knife under some hot water, get the knife a little warm. Wipe it. Now you want to slice into 1/4 inch slices. We're going to do a 1/4 inch dice. We're going to put those right into that bowl in the ice so they stay nice and firm. You'll have more than this if you're working with more clams. Just have to look at the piece and decide how you can get 1/4 inch pieces out of it. Let's use some more hot water on the knife. pieces. Now, as I said in the introduction, it's possible that because of the steaming, that the foie gras will essentially melt into your broth. In which case, you know, the shape of your dice isn't really all that important. But if they don't melt away in the broth, then you want them to have a nice diced, quarter-inch dice shape to them. Okay, so there we go. We have our diced foie gras. We have it sitting on top of the ice. We almost lost nothing to the board. However, I don't like to lose any foie gras, so what I'm going to do is just put that on the edge of the bowl there, put it down inside, so all that foie gras goodness will get into our finished dish. All right, so let's check our prep list. We have diced the foie gras into a quarter-inch dice. And now it's time to start steaming the clams. So I'm going to break and come back at the stove, and we will go to the next step of this dish. Okay, so we're at the stove and we're ready to start steaming the clams. I rinsed off the clams off camera, and with the intent of pulling out any dead ones, but there weren't any dead ones, which was great. So now I have already brought the water in the steaming pot to a boil. And what we're going to do now is put the steamer basket in there. Now I have put enough water into the pot that it just comes up to the holes in the bottom of the steamer basket. Now we're going to add a little Armagnac, and I think the recipe with the description calls for about 5 tablespoons. We don't measure things, so we're just going to put in what's about 2 or 3 tablespoons worth. And then we're going to add the clams. Okay, and then cover. Now, we have the water at a boil. We're gonna leave it at a boil so that as much steam can generate as possible. And the next step is going to be that after the clams have started to open, we are going to add the scallions and the foie gras. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to keep track of the time, and I'll come back when the clams start to open, and I'll tell you how much time has passed. Okay, we're back. It's been about 6 minutes since we went off camera. We have about half of the clams are opening. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add the scallions, and we're going to add the foie gras. Okay, now I'm going to put the top back on and let it steam for about well, since it took about 6 minutes for about half of them to open, we're going to go for another 5 minutes, because I've been talking for a little bit. So I'll go off camera and I'll come back in 5 minutes. So I checked the clams and it looks like 8 minutes. They are all open. So I'm coming back a little sooner than I said I would. What we're going to do first is take the clams out, or I should say take out the steamer basket, and we're going to keep it warm while we do the next step. Now the next thing is actually very simple. We are going to pour this broth into the strainer, and this is really just to catch any debris that was in there, maybe any sand. Straining it into a bowl, basically, and now we've got a lot of grit down there in the bottom. See all that grit in there? So we're going to just rinse that out. Okay, rinsed out all that grit. Take our strainer, which does have some big pieces, like little pebbles, basically, that were probably on the sides of the clams. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned before, but these are little neck clams. You could use cherrystone clams. Really, you could use just about any type of clam. We're pouring that back into the pot. Now let's check our prep list. We have steamed the clams in water and Armagnac. We have added the foie gras and the scallions. We removed the steamer basket. We're keeping it warm. We strained the broth. We poured the broth back into the pot. Now we're going to add the apples and add the apples to that broth. Good. Now, I said earlier we're going to use 4 tablespoons of butter, but actually I realized that that was for the preparation to make 8 small plates, and we're only making half that many. So I took away 2 of the tablespoons of butter. We're just going to whisk 2 tablespoons into this. The way to hold a whisk is basically with your fingers like this or like this, so that you can move it back and forth. If, for example, you were trying to use this to make whipped cream, or to get whipped cream to get stiff, you'd want to go back and forth like this with your fingers, allowing the whisk to act like a pendulum. Here we're really just more stirring it in. We want to make sure all of that butter melts into there. Good. Doesn't take long. Now it's time to plate. So we're going to go back to the board and plate up. Okay, so here we are. Let's plate these up. So I'm going to use these little bowls because this is a small plate. We're going to put 6 of these in each bowl and try to pick out a couple that have some scallion in them. That's 1, that's 2, that's 4, that's 6. Okay, we're going to plate up 2. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. That one, 5, 6. Okay, and then we're going to ladle some of the broth that has the apples over the top. Try to get pour it so that some of the apples get caught by the shells and they are in the shells with the clams. Okay, then we're going to take our pink peppercorns, give it a nice, these are red peppercorns I guess, red or pink. Give it a nice grind over the top so that you can see the color. And then we're going to check our prep list. So we have plated, we've divided the clams, and we've ladled the broth, we've twisted with the peppermill. Now we just have to serve with the bread. Now you can either just put the bread in here, lean it in the side like this, or you could do something else, like maybe put a little slice in the side of the bread and then just mount it on the side of the bowl. Let's take a bigger one. You could also put, whoop, that one broke in half, okay? So let's try this one. Oop, that one broke in half too. Well, that's one of the drawbacks of using bread that's not as fresh. So put that right on the side of the bowl. There we go. There we go. So that is lesson 15, Armagnac steamed clams with apples and foie gras. To do the recap, we worked with some clams. We did some dicing, peeling, and peeling, coring, and dicing the apple. And then we worked with some foie gras. We did some steaming. We kept the clams warm. We strained and we whisked. So you can see the photos of the finished dish on my Instagram, which is Chef's Apprentice Cook Like a Pro, at Chef's Apprentice Cook Like a Pro. Please remember to subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.